Hey, you guys, this is Rashawn Ellis for News, Views, and Conversations. Just going to pop in today and give you some news on Donald J. Trump as far as a lot of the comments he's been making about NATO. He has pretty much stated that he will not be protecting any NATO allies if they don't spend enough percentage on the GDP, which would be for protection of their country if someone was to try to draw down on them, attack them in any form of fashion. He's pretty much saying he wouldn't be doing anything on their behalf. I actually believe if it wasn't for Biden being in place at this time, Ukraine, President Zelensky, they would have lost the war by now. I mean, it's no question that his loyalty is to Russia, to Putin. It is not to the United States. It is not to Zelensky, Ukraine, or any country that stands for freedom. I really believe he would have long ago, the moment that the war started, he would not have been supporting Ukraine at all. They would have been ditched long before now. So he's continuing to make these rants. He's continuing to make these statements. I know when COVID first kicked off in 2020, he was making statements then as to saying that, he was going to make sure that red states got what they needed versus the blue states. And I'm like, okay, if he's talking like that, it's like he's trying to divide us up right there. It's divide and conquer with this guy. He's all about you know, the red states, the blue states. Immediately you're trying to divide the people up and you're going to cater to the people that do what you want and they're going to carry out your agenda. So you're going to definitely make sure they get what they want. But the blue states, you're going to play games, cat and mouse games with the blue states because you know that you guys are not on the same agenda. You're not on the same page when it comes to certain things politically. So it's all, in the whole inner workings of everything that he's about. And the closer we get to the election, it's even scarier to hear this kind of rhetoric coming from him because we already know what kind of leader he has been. And every time he opens his mouth, he continues to show us he's still that dude. He's still that guy. He's still Team Putin. He's on some other stuff. According to the latest new book by Bob Woodward, it's been said that he has spoken to Putin 7 times since he left office. So this is what we're dealing with here when he's sitting here saying things like he's not going to protect NATO. He will let Putin do whatever he wants to do with NATO countries. And, again, saying that he's not going to protect any of the allies that have been paying into that protection. So it says a whole mouthful. I really believe he has a lot of the ideals that are parallel to Putin as far as an oligarchy, if you will, a dictatorship, which is what brings us to Project 2025. Total dictatorship, total totalitarian system, pretty much, total control over the people, and having people in place in his government to where they do what he says. And if they don't do what he says, then of course we know what that means. So he wants to align the United States government with people that are ready and willing to fall in line, pretty much the same ones that helped create the Project 2025 book in the order that they want to do things. And I just think it's really a trip too, because he's not even a Christian, but you're telling Christians to go out here and vote for you. Makes no sense at all. It's like he's a complete contradiction to what he says he stands for. He does not stand for. He is not for the people. He is not for Christians. He is not for anyone but for himself. He has no loyalty or patriotism to the United States. His loyalty is to another man in another country for whatever those reasons may be. From what we understand before he even got out of office, we don't know if he's even provided classified information to Putin, which would be a violation to the Logan Act. So we don't know what he's done. We don't know what business dealings he may have right off exactly. Have to do some more investigating and some more research on that. But something else is going on because he has been like this with Putin ever since he got into office the first time. I just want to give you a little read up on what the Logan Act is. The Logan Act was enacted January 30th, 1799. It is a United States federal law that criminalizes the negotiation of a dispute between the United States and a foreign government by an unauthorized American citizen. The intent behind the act is to prevent unauthorized negotiations from undermining the government's position. The act was passed following George Logan's unauthorized negotiations with France in 1798 and was signed into law by President John Adams on January 30th, 1799. The act was amended in 1994, changing the penalty for violation from fines from 5,000 to fine under this title. This appears to be the only amendment to the act. Violations of the Logan Act is a felony, punishable with imprisonment for up to 3 years. So only two people so far have been indicted on charges of violating the act, one in 1892 and the other in 1852, I believe that is. I'm sorry, I believe it's 1802 and 1852. So neither was convicted, but however, there is something in place for these types of situations to where you're actually providing information to another foreign entity about what's going on here in this country. So again, everybody definitely needs to get out and vote on November the 5th. We can't afford to have this kind of stuff going on at a time like this, with countries being at wars. Nobody really wants to say it, but it already feels like we are. They just haven't officially announced it. So it's a lot going on. It's a lot going on, and he is definitely not someone that I think that needs to lead this country, because he's pretty much showing and saying what we will become if he was to be put back into office again. Again, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I'm about to play you a clip of what CNN had to say about it to add to the commentary that I just added as well. So I will see you guys next time in the video, and make it a great one.
During his speech in Detroit today, the same one where he insulted Detroit, Donald Trump also bragged before the city's economic club about his willingness to abandon NATO allies in the face of Russian aggression.
Does that mean that if we don't pay, you will not protect us from Russia? It used to be the Soviet Union, now it's Russia. Sort of the same thing. I said, that's what it means. I will not protect you under any form. You will not be protected.
Donald Trump was talking about NATO allies who don't spend enough percentage of their GDP on defense, and the U.S. would have to come to anyone in NATO's defense, obviously, if one of them was hit by an attacker that is in the, of course, NATO treaty. But that chapter in his first term, something that we have long heard him echo, has led some lifelong Republicans, including some of the ones who served in his administration, to say that they cannot support Donald Trump a second time. My source tonight is one of them, former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton. Ambassador, I just wonder what you make of, it's not just this comment, because we've heard Donald Trump say things like this before, but it's the comment in the context of what we've learned recently from Bob Woodward's new book, which is that he and Putin have reportedly spoken at least 7 times since he left office. What do you make of the comment in light of that reporting?
Well, I think the number of times that he's spoken with Putin is in dispute. The Russians deny it. We don't have any other independent evidence. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he did. And it would simply confirm what has been evident for some time, that Trump thinks he's got a great personal relationship with Vladimir Putin, and in Trump's mind, this is consistent, whether it's Xi Jinping or Kim Jong-un or other adversarial leaders like that, that if he has a good relationship personally, then the U.S. and that country have a good relationship. That's just utter nonsense. And these comments about NATO, he's made before. Some of his advisors have written op-eds on how he'll interpret the NATO treaty about not defending countries that aren't spending adequately on defense. That means the end of NATO. Let's be clear. I wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal months ago. You can't defend Poland, which is spending about 3%, and if we're unfortunately driven back to the German border by the Russians, to say, excuse me, Russians, can you just pause for a moment? You can do what you want in Germany. We'll see at the French border because they're spending over 2%. It means the end of NATO. And I just make one more comment, if I may. For Republicans who believe that Trump will be okay in a second term, that he won't ditch support for Ukraine, that he won't withdraw from NATO, that he won't interpret the Treaty of Washington in a way that makes it wholly useless, it's going to be okay. Go ahead and vote for Trump if you want, but for goodness sakes, do it with your eyes open. The odds that he will withdraw from NATO are very high.
You know, if you were the National Security Advisor currently, and you found out the former president was talking directly with Putin, a hostile foreign leader who had invaded a sovereign country, as Putin has done, and that former president was not briefing anyone at your State Department or you on those conversations, what would your response be?
Well, let me say first, I think President Biden, very early in his term, made a decision that Trump would not receive any briefings of classified information, which I think makes him unique in contemporary times as a former president, not to get briefings like that just as a courtesy, so that the incumbent president, if he wanted to, could call a former president up and talk with him about crises. And I think it reflected Biden's concern, which is entirely legitimate, that Trump can't keep his mouth shut and that he might reveal currently classified information to our adversaries. But I do want to say this about the general subject of a former American official talking to leaders of friendly foreign countries or even leaders of not so friendly foreign countries. I think it's a gross violation of the First Amendment to say that somehow the Logan Act makes that illegal. It may be imprudent, it may be unwise. In Trump's case, it may be dangerous given what he may be saying to Putin. But you got to be very careful what you say here. Otherwise, a lot of former officials are in violation of the Logan Act. I think, remember when it was passed, remember it's been prosecuted twice, so I think people need to calm down a little bit about this. Notwithstanding, I think it was ill-advised for Trump to talk to Putin if he did after he left office.
Well, and of course,
it's not illegal, and there's not a criminal conspiracy that immediately arises.
But of course, we all remember Trump wanted to prosecute John Kerry for talking to Iranian officials, even though he was briefing the State Department. But I have to ask you about this, Ambassador, because in this book from Bob Woodward, he reveals that Trump sent Putin COVID tests at the height of the pandemic. Putin didn't want anyone to know about it. According to this, he said, don't tell them, but it's worse for you than it is for me, which made us think about this book that Yasmin Abudaleb and Damian Paletta at the Washington Post wrote about the pandemic, where they quoted Trump at one point saying that he hoped that you would die from COVID, essentially. He was worried about another aide getting it. And then he said, quote, according to this book, hopefully COVID takes out John, referring to you. I mean, in light of the fact that he was sending COVID tests to Putin, how do you read that now?
Well, I'm grateful that he was thinking about me. What can I say during a crisis like COVID? Look, this is pure Trump that people are getting now. And you know, interestingly, Dmitry Peskov, who is longtime Vladimir Putin spokesman, confirmed that Trump and Putin had that conversation about or that Trump had given the COVID test, even as the Trump campaign was denying anything about it. So the Russians, in effect, have undercut Trump's effort to distance himself from Russia. This is the way Trump reacts to these strong authoritarian leaders. I can't analyze it psychologically, but he just likes being a big guy with big guys. They don't have to deal with, you know, independent legislatures and judiciaries and due process and all that. Just do what they want to do. That's what he wants to do, too.
Ambassador John Bolton, we are glad that you're safe tonight. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Glad to do it.